Hello, hello, hello. How is everybody? Welcome to our Fireside Chat. That is so loud behind me. So apologies for that. If you're autistic like me, that just caused sensory overload. So my name is Jamie Shields. For visual description, I am a white male with dark hair, which is meant to be pushed up to one side. It is roasting. It has fell down because of the sweat. I have blue eyes and I have a short dark beard. I am wearing a Disabled by Society t-shirt and it is black, and I am wearing a green, white and I think it's red striped shirt on top. And I am joined today by Ebony from the fantastic JD. If you don't know JD, get on the high street, they are everywhere. You will know JD. So Ebony, I'm going to pass over to you.
Hi.
Give us an introduction to yourself and a visual description.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm so honoured to be here this afternoon. So my name's Ebony. I'm our lead people partner for technology at JD. A huge part of my role is really driving our people strategy across that area of the group, really driving things like our D&I strategy, and really helping the organisation change and manage those teams as we continue to grow across the globe. Visual description of me today, and I do wish that I wore shorts like you, Jamie. I've dropped the ball on my outfit today, so I'm wearing some light blue jeans, a black fitted t-shirt, I'm wearing a green disability lanyard. I also have matching green socks. I came prepared today. And I'm actually like very, very hot. So I feel like my head is a bit shiny. I'm a short black female with a little top knot today.
So if any of you heard that we're both roasting, so if you do feel like coming up and fanning us, that would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be great.
So we're going to dive into it, and the way that we're going to have this conversation is we're going to talk about the fantastic work that you are doing in the space of disability inclusion.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard for organisations to know where to start, what do we do, and they all have this fear of getting it wrong,
Yeah.
which is understandable. It's a scary thing when it's something that you don't have the lived experience yourself.
Yeah.
But when you actually speak to a disabled person, you realise, wait a second, this is not scary, we just need to be a bit more inclusive.
Absolutely.
So I have found myself challenged a lot of times trying to find inclusive employment.
Yeah.
You know, there's either barriers to entry, there's no feeling of belonging in the workplace. So what does inclusive recruitment mean to disabled people at JD?
I think, it's really important for me to kind of highlight that JD as a group, globally, we're still very much at the start of that journey. But what it really means is that we are smashing down those barriers of entry for people coming into the organisation. We are having the conversation, and I love what you said there, Jamie, is that sometimes the hardest thing is actually starting that conversation and kind of beating on that drum. And I think that the more that groups of people in the organisation feel comfortable to have that conversation and share their lived experience, which is a huge thing that we've done a lot of work on at JD Group, the more that we can understand where we might need to make those changes to ensure that we are attracting and retaining people who are disabled or from a disadvantaged experience into the organisation. So I think it's all about having the conversation, involving senior leadership teams in that conversation, and starting to just figure out where we can just start to make these changes and not be afraid to have those difficult and what can be quite uncomfortable and emotive conversations. But me in my role, I kind of am not scared to kind of sit there in front of our senior leadership team and say, hey, we could be doing more.
And that's it. We can all be doing more. You know,
absolutely.
I think there's never an end goal when it comes to disability inclusion in the workplace. It's constantly improving. It's constantly reviewing. Because I said earlier in another panel that if we look now at the current climate with AI, the changes we're seeing even within the recruitment space and in the technology space with it, it's just accelerated. It's like the future is now, if you know what I mean.
Definitely.
So there's no end goal, there's no final destination, just that continuous improvement. And I really like what you said there about it's not just about attracting disabled people. You want to retain us. And that's something we see a lot is people talking about, we want to hire disabled people. Yeah. We get hired, we get in the role, we don't get adjustments, or we don't get that feeling of belonging. I'm 33 years of age. I know I look 21. I'm 33 years of age, and I have never felt belonging in the workplace until I started my current employment with AMS, where I work. Wow. And I've been there 3.5 years, but I never felt belonging. So I want to ask you, what are some of the things that you're doing to create a more inclusive workplace? What are some of the practices and policies that you've maybe put in place?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the most recent things that I'm very proud of to have been involved in driving, along with Carly Tate, our D&I business partner, and Kiza, who is here as our inclusion manager, is really looking at our whole process specifically for inclusive recruitment. Everything from down to changing our recruitment system and website to make sure that actually it's really clear and easy for someone to apply for a job role with us, and also tick a little box that says, I would like to be considered under the Disability Confidence Scheme, and I would like to talk to you about adjustments, to then actually looking at our process for people to give us feedback if they feel that they're discriminated against throughout the process, or even within the organisation. Once they join us, we have a full kind of policy that sits behind that to make sure that we have someone designated within our recruitment teams, working closely with our D&I team, that they can comfortably raise whatever that concern might be, or it might just be that they felt that they didn't get the adjustments that they needed. Again, we're very much at the start of our journey there, and that's something that's just about to have been implemented. But I think that's a really important one. Another one is we've just started building some of our employee network groups at JD, so again, very new for the group, where we're starting to have really safe spaces for people to share their lived experience. And I love what you said there around kind of you being passionate about kind of driving that education piece through. I think it is about education, and these employee network groups within JD are something that is starting to educate other people in the group, certainly our senior leadership team, on where we can make some changes and what people, and certainly people with hidden disability or physical disability, are going through. So I think those are some of the key things.
You are doing a lot by the sounds of it. And
marginal gains, I think. It's about those kind of small steps.
And that's it. It is. It's small changes. It's what can you do in the now, what can you do in a month's time from now, and what will you be doing 6 months. And I think it's really important to be really honest and authentic in the space about where you actually are.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say, I applaud you and JD for saying, we have started this, and this is where we're going. And by the sounds of it, you have started and you're snowballing because you're doing fantastic.
It's just about kind of taking those small steps. And I think a huge other thing is that we've just started extracting and looking at our data from our recruitment ATS system that we've implemented. That has never happened at JD, believe it or not. We literally couldn't see the data and the demographics of people joining us. And that is a huge thing for me, because in my role I have to look at a lot of data and use that data to drive some really great decisions for us. And a huge kind of objective for me is to be looking at that data, looking at our candidate surveys when people are going through our process, and seeing where are the gaps, where can we make improvements, certainly across retail, certainly across our supply chain division. I've heard some fantastic things from Amazon, Coca-Cola that they're doing, and I really want to use our data to help implement some of these things. That I absolutely believe that we're just starting on that journey of doing more, but we can absolutely continue that, and we never want to stop making sure that we can create fantastic workplaces for everyone.
That's incredible. And I think, as a disabled person, I used to have this fear of kicking that box. Do you have a disability? Tick this box. Or do you need adjustments? Tick here or email here. We have such a fear when it comes to sharing. I don't use the word disclose, because disclose to me seems really like formal or something. I'm not disclosing. I want to share my experience with you. And there was a conversation yesterday with Jane Hatton from Even Break, and she was talking about, she shares right from the beginning, but it's different for everyone. You need to find that time. So I wonder, when it comes to data, I wonder, is there any advice you'd want to maybe say to people about that, how that data kind of gets used, and the importance of that data?
Yeah, I think it's important that it is looked at upon a group that are really passionate, but also have probably the expertise at looking at that data, because I think data can tell a story, but you can also make data say whatever you want it to say. I think, again, at JD, it is something that is really, we're early on in our journey and starting to look at that data, but I think it's important it depends what you want to achieve. I think at JD we really want to start to just understand our organisation and understand our landscape. So I think, I don't know what your thoughts are, Jamie, but it might be depending on what you're trying to achieve. And I think for us at JD, it's understanding our landscape, understanding our demographics across the group and globally, and then, okay, where can we make some changes, and what are also those people telling us as well.
And that's it. I'm autistic. I love data. Like, give me as much data as possible. It tells a story. And I know not everyone is the same. Some people look at it and think, oh, no, this isn't for me. But it tells a story of that organisation.
Yeah.
It tells a story of where you are and you're attracting. Are you actually attracting the people that we're talking about hiring? You know, are we actually reaching those disabled people? Because then that can influence where you start to promote your roles. That can influence where maybe you're changing things. And I know, having Carly here yesterday, for anyone who doesn't know Carly, go on and follow her on every social platform.
Incredible.
She's incredible. Yeah. And I want to ask, you know, what has been the impact around these changes? Because at the start, the impact, I'm imagining, is very far-reaching.
Yeah, I think, and I love what you said about just feeling that you belong, and certainly, you know, I've had many experiences in my kind of career and in my life where I've not felt I belong in an organisation. And I would like to say, in the time that I've been at JD, I can see that we are starting to increase our diversity in the workforce, not only within head office but across the group. And people are starting to feel comfortable to have these conversations and talk about their lived experience, whether they're autistic. I think that representation and visibility is so important, and I really think that that's so powerful, even though, and I was saying this to Keza earlier actually, that I personally always feel I could do more, like why JD, we're not doing more, I could do more, but actually just having people like Carly Tate within the organisation, having people kind of come out and say, hey, I'm autistic and this is my lived experience and these are the things I have challenges with, means that someone else feels braver to say, hey, you know what, actually I struggle with that too, and hey, actually I've got ADHD and I really am struggling with concentrating, and that become, in quote, normalised. Is so powerful, because I really think that if you see people who look, sound like you, have a lived experience as you, that it's not in your kind of mind of not a reality, that it becomes a reality for you. And certainly I think for me the dream is to see that people within JD Group of all walks of life, disabilities, are making that way up to that senior level in the organisation. I mean, how powerful would it be to see someone who is a CEO of JD Group who is a wheelchair user? You know, how powerful would that be? So I think it is far-reaching, and we are seeing these conversations and these barriers be broken down in JD. But I think that is the dream, really, to get where we have a representation at senior level, you know, influential group level of people who are from the disability community as well.
Representation matters.
Absolutely.
Like, honestly, really does. I'm going to tell my age again and again. I'm 33, but I never seen people like me in the workplace. Even when workplaces were talking about disability, it was always the same images being used. Companies use the same stockpile photos, so they do from Adobe. Yeah. It's a wheelchair user, it's always the same photo. And I think that doesn't highlight the diversity of disability. No. Show me the adjustments people are using in the workplace. Show me somebody using stimming devices. Yeah. You know, I stim so much at work. And I love at the moment that this momentum where we're seeing more and more people using stimming devices and talking about it. And I think there's something really beautiful in that narrative, that we are changing that narrative, and we're saying difference is not less than. No. It is to be celebrated. So I want to talk a little bit more about your employee network groups.
Yeah.
So an employee network group, for anyone who doesn't know, is a group within a workplace who they foster that sense of belonging. They help with creating a community of individuals with shared experiences, different experiences, who collectively want to make a change and to support the organisation. It is voluntary off the side of your desk, and it is really a transformative role. So I want to ask for you, what is the importance of organisations having them?
I mean, and this is the first time actually joining an organisation that I'm part of an employee network group, and an employee network group has existed for race and in general. So I can speak from my own lived experience, but also I think for organisations. What it does is I think it really empowers those groups of people to share the real deal, what they're going through, and what they feel the organisation could do better, but also feed that information through in a safe space, because I think it could be very difficult for you to sit there and say, okay, CTO, or say, hey, HR director, listen, you know, this office is completely inaccessible, the light's too bright, you know, change it, you know, I'm really struggling. Not everyone has the confidence to do that, and so what I feel these groups do is they give people that empowerment to share their experience, share where they feel the organisation can make changes, and that feedback can be fed through in a really safe way up to, say, for example, at JD it would be Carly Tate, and then up to our senior leadership team within HR to then actually strategize and think, okay, how can we make this happen, all while that person feels safe and not putting themselves in what they feel could be a vulnerable position. So I think it's so powerful, and I can speak from my own experience of just really empowering employees.
And you know, that is such a word for me. Like, I was speaking to my mum earlier. I'm a mummy's boy, I ring her multiple times a day. And we were talking about this event, Disability Expo, and she asked me, what is it like? And I said, it was empowering. I don't ever be in this large number of people with lived experiences of disability. I don't get that, and it was very empowering. And when I work at AMS, when I was part of those ERGs, I felt that empowerment. I felt that my voice wasn't a solo voice, because it's easier to listen to a group than one individual. It's harder to say no to a group of people,
Absolutely.
particularly when you're emailing that person every day saying this needs fixed. You know, that collective voice is so important.
Yeah.
And I think as well about the representation. You know, I've been registered blind. Well, I wasn't registered at birth, but I've been disabled since birth. I got registered blind when I was like 3 or 4. And I didn't know I was neurodivergent. I'm autistic and I am ADHD as well.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that until I actually joined the neurodiversity ERG at my work. And it was through hearing other people's lived experiences and hearing their challenges, and I realised, oh my goodness, that's
made
me.
you question,
And I think that's the same for most people who are diagnosed later. You have that eureka moment. It's like, oh, they're talking about me.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I do that too. And then you fall into this rabbit hole of finding out. But you don't get that without representation. And that,
No, exactly.
those ERGs, those employee network groups, they are the representation. It's like a banner. Now, I want to ask you a little bit more about the impact this has had on the wider JD. So what has the impact been for you with these changes for the internal colleagues, but equally for candidates coming through?
Yeah, I think, and certainly, in my role, prior to this role in JD, I was heading up our recruitment team across technology and supply chain, so I can speak from a recruitment point of view as well, is that all of a sudden, and it's not that disabled candidates probably were always applying for roles at JD, but they probably weren't getting through, if I'm being honest with you, and there wasn't that education internally of how we can adjust our processes to accommodate those people and make sure that they get through the process. I can see that has changed at JD, that there's that education piece there, and we're seeing people not only get through to interview process, but also being hired. Even more recently within our marketing team, actually Carly called me up and said, oh, Ebony, I'm so happy, I've just seen that this fantastic gentleman has joined our marketing team, he's a wheelchair user, it's fantastic. So we're actually starting to see people actually being hired within the organisation, so that's massive for me. But also it's a twofold thing, as you said, Jamie, is that okay, so people are seeing more disabled users, people with ADHD, people with autism actually joining the organisation. Oh, okay, oh, so this is an organisation for me. Oh, brilliant, I can say, hey, I've got autism, this is what I'm struggling with. It has that positive knock-on effect, and I've seen that.
And, even in the thoughts of, having that representation, joining those networks, I got a mentor from mine. I found people who I could speak to about challenges, because when you go through life and you don't have, I'm not saying I'm not an only child, but none of my other siblings were disabled. I had nobody I could really speak to about my disability. So from my whole life, I fostered internalized ableism, because I thought, well, I'm less than, my disability makes me less. And I didn't understand that was the wrong narrative, and that was the ableism I was feeling. So for me, those groups can really help deconstruct a lot of those internal beliefs that we know
stereotypes
are harmful.
as well.
100%. We live in a society that disables us, and I think what you're doing right now is you are really starting at the start of your journey, but when I look what you're doing, there's companies out there who claim to be inclusive, and I'm not going to name them, but there's companies out there who we all know. It's a tick box exercise to them. Hiring disabled talent is a tick box, when really they haven't made the changes. The recruitment process is still inaccessible, and they're not using that data to really help capture where they are.
Yeah.
You've talked about some really amazing things she's doing. Now I'm going to ask you a really honest question, and that is, what do you want to see happen next? What is next?
I think for me, it's starting to work with more disabled partners. So we're actually tapping into a network of disabled talent. That is something that I think is huge for JD that we're not doing currently. I think starting to come up with an action plan off the back of the data and the candidate feedback and employee feedback that we're doing. More focus groups, again, to tap into some of the changes that we could make. I also think in our kind of employee networks, and this is something that me and Carly have spoken about, actually adding some more layers of structure in there. So we're starting to get a seat at the table, so to speak, with our HR director, with our senior leadership team, and saying, hey, you know, this is what your employees are saying. These are our recommendations. You know, how can you help us make that happen? So I think empowering our employee networks more, and certainly people like Carly in the organisation, I think absolutely has to be next for us. We just announced that we are due to expand into other parts of the world. So this has got to be kind of next, I think, for me, if we're going to do that and continue to be a global player that is truly inclusive at every single layer.
And I think, you know, congratulations on your new regions, by the way. Working globally within the disability inclusion space, it has its own unique challenges.
Yeah.
You know, if we look at the language, self-identity language, it changes between the UK, the US, you go into Europe, but it's every other country. So it's very hard to stay on top of. And then you've got different laws, you've got different protections. So, you know, working globally, what is one thing, I think, you know, for yourselves, that, you know, what do you intend to do? Will your ERGs be regional? Will they go global? What do you intend to do with them?
It's a really good point. I actually don't know the answer to that, if I'm honest with you. I think that they absolutely need to be global. We've tapped into our USA team, who are, I wouldn't say they're super far down that journey, but they're a lot farther than where we are in the UK. So tapping into that and creating that network. I mean, I'd love to see a bit more of a kind of a DE&I leadership team that sits across the globe and that feeds into almost kind of that senior, whether it be that group diversity director level. I think we need more expertise coming into the organisation, you know, because JD doesn't, you know, necessarily have enough of that. So I think, I don't know the answer to that, but if I was the one making decisions, that's kind of where I would start to spearhead this out and grow that, and really, as I've touched on just a minute ago, creating an action plan that is looked at by our kind of board and talked about then at board level.
That's fantastic, because, you know, when we think about disability inclusion, you need that buy-in from every department.
Yeah, absolutely has to be from the top.
100%, and you cannot silo it off and say, well, this team deals with this here, and that's it. We're just here to look good. It doesn't work like that. You need everybody at that table. And companies who've went through that disability confident journey. Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, disability confident government scheme, there's 3 levels. Level 1, you sign up. Level 2, you are done a bit of an internal audit. Level 3, you've been externally audited. Yeah. Now, with that disability confidence scheme, it's about collaborating with the different departments in your organisation. And that collaboration is so important. And I love what you said there. You know, you'd love to see that shared knowledge. There is so much shared knowledge within this space, because we're all so individual. You know, there's no one size fits all for anybody, because our needs it's like shoes. I tell everybody it's like a shoe. Not everybody wears the same size shoe, so it doesn't.
That's true.
So I want to ask about your role specifically. So tell us about your role and the impact that you and your role have within the DI space at JD.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, first of all, it kind of touches on what I mentioned earlier, and I was talking to Keezer about this, about that representation. I think, you know, just me being in the role that I am at JD is kind of massive representation. But I think for me, it's about being an ally, and I'm kind of not afraid to have those difficult conversations, in the rooms that I might well be in with our senior leadership team and heads of department within technologies, that's my area, the CTO, and say, hey, you know, we could be doing more, and have you thought about this? And yes, actually, let's have a conversation about this, and let's feed that into our agenda and into our strategy. That for me is kind of a huge part of my role, is kind of having those conversations and helping shape things, and where I can make sure that we're getting a one step forward when it comes to inclusion. That's a huge win for me, because not only obviously is it the right thing to do, but also you know that organisations with diverse employees are more profitable, do perform better. So it's a win-win for me to kind of every room that I'm in to be pushing that agenda and banging that drum and being an ally. So that's I guess a huge part of my role that I'm very proud of and want to keep doing more of. And just even being here today is just such a huge honour for me. And my partner is autistic and has given me a huge insight into her lived experience. So it's fantastic to be able to be here, and I'm taking so many learnings. I was speaking to Coca-Cola, so it's great. I'm going to be able to feed this back in.
I love Coca-Cola too. I've drunk so many of them today, and they do amazing work. Now, for me, you know, we've had a really great conversation about where you are, and you've been really honest about a starting point, and I honestly do applaud you for that, because for only starting out, you're so far along already. I want to ask, what advice would you give? Let's do organisations first. Other organisations who are maybe starting out and they're thinking, where do we go? Where do we start to begin to become more inclusive for disabled people? What would your advice be for those organisations starting?
Do you know what? I think some advice would be to get out there and speak to other organisations, speak to charities, speak to partners, and find out more about that community's lived experience, and then speak to them about some of the things that they would recommend you to do, and take that back into the organisation and start having the conversation. It doesn't take anything to start having conversations with your employees about, hey, what's your lived experience, and how could we be doing better? I think that organisations would be surprised at how many people would come forward and say, hey, you know, actually, this is my lived experience, and it could well be right at the top layer of your organisation. So I think that would be a huge piece of advice, is get out there, start learning from other partners, charities, organisations, and then start having the conversation, whether it be, you know, in forums, focus groups, at board level, just start having the conversation.
I love that there. And the one thing I always say to people is, my advice is always get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that.
Just because you don't understand it or you don't have the lived experience does not mean that you should shy away from it.
Yeah.
Listen to that lived experience, and we know that you're doing that at JD with Carly Tate.
Yeah.
Again, we're shamelessly plugging Carly here, but if you have not followed Carly, please go follow Carly.
She's absolutely
just amazing. And then look, we've talked about what other organisations can do, and in contrast, we want to open up the floor in a moment to our audience to ask some questions. But I want to ask you, for any job seeker out there who's thinking about, do you know what, this conversation's made me want to go work with JD, where do they go look at your open roles, or where do they where do they go to find out more?
Yeah, so they can go onto our careers site, and we've more recently launched our new careers site, which is really simplified our language and made it really easy for people to apply. So you can jump on there, or of course you can approach myself on LinkedIn or any of our recruitment executives, and they'll be able to have the conversation with you and start getting you through the process.
Fantastic. And look, another piece of advice is, ask people from JD questions, and I tell this to every job seeker who is disabled. If you want to know how the organisation is internally, speak to the people who work there.
Absolutely.
Speak to those people who work there. Ebony, you have been so honest. You have shown us what a starting snowball effect looks like, because you're snowballing. So I'm going to open up the floor to some questions. This is going to be fun because I'm registered blind. So if you are going to ask a question, please do shout me down. Do we have any questions from the audience? Don't be shy.
Oh, we've got
there we
one.
go. We've got a question.
Yeah.
I'm going to see if I can stretch across. Here we go.
Thank you so much. That was
Hiya.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
A bit closer. Okay. Thank you so much for that talk. That was really, really interesting. My name's Morwenna. I'm a chair of the Disability Network at my organisation, which I'm not going to name, but they have about 3,000 employees in the UK.
Wow.
We're a new network, and we're finding that HR are very defensive. Like you said, when we kind of go to them and talk to them about these things, they say they're interested to work with us, but really they're quite unwilling to change. I wonder if you had any advice on how to approach those difficult conversations when people are defensive.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think, I mean, if I guess if I was in your position, I would, I guess, try and link in with someone else, maybe not at that senior level, to kind of get that buy-in. But I think it's just being bold and really just, I guess, highlighting perhaps a colleague's story, someone's lived experience, that testimonial. And really, because I think that if something's not your lived experience, it's easy to forget. For example, I can walk, I don't need to use a wheelchair. So I'm not necessarily going to think, oh, what might it be for someone who's a wheelchair user to access our retail store? So I think maybe sharing some of those real key kind of stories might help, or linking in with someone else in the organisation, i.e. like someone like me who's that people partner who has that kind of link to HR, a senior leadership team, who can kind of I guess help do that sell for you. But definitely please get in touch with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to jump on a call, or we can have a coffee. Oh, you're back.
There we go, Sanctuary Overload again. I am back in the room. So I think for me, with that pushback, there's so much pushback when it comes to disability.
Yeah.
I think we know when it comes to DEI conversations, so diversity, equity, inclusion, disability has historically been left aside, and there was no thought of the intersectional experiences, and it's just kind of been the back burner. So now it's at the forefront of the conversation. There's that sphere, and there is a bit of a reluctance sometimes from senior leaders, and this is why I'm such an advocate for having an EXCO sponsor. So that leader who sits in that group, who's your voice in the boardroom, who is advocating for you,
that
but
ally,
equally that ally, 100%. But one thing I'm always keen in saying as well is, push back. Ask, what is the
Be
fear?
bold,
Yeah,
Call
that
it out.
boldness.
Call it out.
100%. I hope that answered that question slightly. And if you do want questions said, reach out to Ebony on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to help. Any more questions from our fabulous audience? Don't be shy. Perfect. Well, listen, I'm going to ask you one more question, Ebony.
Go ahead.
When will you be here today for people to come up and say hello to after?
Yes, please
Perfect.
do. I'd love to meet everyone.
Perfect. So if you are shy and you don't want to ask questions in front of everybody today, please come up and approach us after, and I'm sure we'll be more than happy to get you sorted. But Ebony, I really want to say thank you so much for this fantastic conversation, and can we get a massive round of applause for Ebony and for the work they're doing at JD?
Thanks so much, guys.
Oh, that needs to be louder. What was that? Louder? Come on. There we go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.